Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Schwartz, and I'm the founder of the LSAT blog. And today I'm very excited to be chatting with Wentworth Miller. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, Steve. I'm sorry I can't, I'm not, I'm a bit techno challenged here, so I should be speaking into a speaker, but we'll do it this way. And thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Thanks for joining, and we'll do our best to make this work. Now, I couldn't help noticing that I recognized your name when I first came across you several years ago because I'm a fan of the TV show Prison Break. Are you related to the actor from that show?
Yeah, I'm afraid when your clients or potential clients see or hear Wentworth Miller, they're going to be disappointed. They're going to think, "My, is that guy aged?" But no, that's my son, and I'm very proud of his abilities and all of that. But he's the more famous Wentworth Miller. But I have been out here toiling for many more years than he.
Right. Because I know that the LEWS has been around for decades. I came across it when I first got into this industry. And I was hoping that today you could share a bit about that process that went into creating it and what exactly it is, because I've got a lot of people reaching out to me asking about law school prep, 1L prep, and I understand that that's kind of your forte. Can you talk a bit about what you've created?
Well, yeah, it's kind of crazy how long this has gone on. I guess I'm in the 39th year. LEEWS stands for law essay exam writing. Used to be system. I think of it more as a science, and I do have a fairly good memory going all the way back to when I was a law student. And the important thing is I started at Yale Law back in fall of 1969. I know your students are all about LSAT at this point, and I might note that I was pretty nervous before taking the LSAT in November 1968. I was an undergraduate at Yale as well, and about a third of my class of 1,000 sat for it one sunny Saturday morning. I think it was Dartmouth football weekend. Anyway, I was pretty nervous getting ready for it. There weren't test preparation programs per se, but I got myself a bunch of Barron's books with old LSAT exams, and I prepped feverishly for about 3 weeks before the exam, and I went into it as I think everyone hopefully would, nervous but psyched up. I felt I had done everything I could, and I was pretty fired up that morning, and things worked out really well. They had a different scoring system then. It was an 800 scale. I got a 750, and that was about 55 points over the average LSAT of entering Harvard law students that particular year. So, yeah, with characteristic, I suppose, arrogance and also cheapness, because I couldn't really afford the registration fees. I just applied to Harvard, Yale, and Chicago and got into all three and got money from Yale. So that's where I entered in fall 69, and pretty nervous, but it's very exciting going to law school. You're going to be a lawyer, and unless you grew up around a bunch of lawyers, and I didn't, it was kind of a big deal.
No doubt. Wow. It stands out to me that you only studied for the LSAT for 3 weeks, and times were definitely different back then. Now, 3 months is barely enough with increased competition.
I think there probably was a lot less competition then, a lot less test preparation, but that prep sold me on the whole concept of preparing for tests, because I scored a whole lot higher than my SAT would have indicated, and then I went into law school. Now, there may be questions your students have about law school or what to expect. The interesting thing is really not much has changed since I started law school. Same large first-year classes. About the only really new development is everybody's got computers now.
Yeah, definitely. You see those in all the classrooms now. So I'm wondering, the LSAT's competitive. Law school is also quite competitive. I've heard anecdotes and stories of people like stealing others' textbooks and notes, sabotage of the sort. And I'm wondering, entering law students, what can they expect? What should they know before going in? I know that's a broad question, but maybe there's an angle from which you want to tackle it.
Yeah. I'm sure everybody wants to know what happens that first day, that first week. A daughter of mine is a lawyer, graduated from UVA Law a number of years ago, practices down in Miami. And so when she was about to start law school, the first thing I told her was, look, go and find the LEEWS book exchange. They're going to be upper class law students who've commandeered a classroom somewhere. And you can get pretty much all the books that are assigned. I mean, they might not be the most up to date, but pretty up to date is enough. And you can get them at a quarter, a fifth of the retail price. And I gather case books, or some of them are up to $300 now, so it can be quite a savings. You'll also want a commercial outline in each one of your courses. I won't say which one, but if those are $50 new, you can pick them up for $15. So go find the LEEWS book exchange. There will be an assignment the very first day of law school, same as when I started law school, and you'll know which books you're going to need. What else?
So you're saying commercial outline, it doesn't matter which one.
Well, I suppose I should say something about my program, because it answers an awful lot of these questions. First, let me say, okay, I had this high LSAT. I can't say I was the most diligent student. The big deal back in 1968, 69 was not having to go to Vietnam. We felt it was an unjust war, and I suppose my first negotiation or lawyer-like experience was getting myself through that hurdle, and I didn't cut off my feet or anything like that. I simply got into the draft lottery. They drafted in my district, which was Los Angeles, up to 195. I was 201, so I was home free. There's a type of exam that's featured in every single law school, and there are more than 200 law schools in America. Most people don't know that. And this exam is modeled on the essay exercise portion of bar exams. So all the exams in first year are pretty much what we call a hypothetical type essay exercise. You get this crazy bunch of facts, and the best way to explain it is, imagine you're an attorney in your office, and instead of one person coming in the door with a problem, 5 or 6 come in, and they're all talking at once, and then they clamor in unison, advise us of our rights and liabilities, and you've got maybe 50 minutes or 90 minutes. It's never enough time. And basically, the exercise is perform as if you were an attorney, but it's not really realistic, because no attorney is going to say anything legal at that point. They're going to point to one person and say, I'll get back to you tomorrow, and another one, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. And an attorney always takes the requisite amount of time to proceed prudently and give the issue, the legal problem, proper consideration. So the first thing you have to understand is law school exams are totally unfair, because lawyers never operate under this kind of time pressure. I didn't much care about it. I was happy not to be in Vietnam. And in that fall, Yale, which is very progressive, instituted pass-fail grading in the first term. So I got through the first term, passed all my courses, but I have to admit, I was never good at taking these essay exams. Most law students are not. The average score on a law school exam is somewhere in the range of 25 to 35 points on a 100-point scale. That's right. Just about everybody in law school fails their exams by any other measure. So it's a pretty low bar of performance. I wasn't much worried about that in law school. I left after a year, got a Rhodes Scholarship, came back a couple of years later. Students may be interested to know that Hillary Clinton was a classmate when I started. I played on a touch football team with Clarence Thomas. One of our current Supreme Court justices, let me see now, which one? The one from New Jersey, very conservative. He was a class member at some point. I'm getting to that point where names begin to fade in and out. But I went on to practice as a county assistant district attorney in Brooklyn, and then an assistant United States attorney. That's a federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York, which is Brooklyn, Westchester, Long Island, Queens, Staten Island. And somehow I got involved in tutoring students for the New York bar. And so I revisited this problem of essay exams and had an awakening after several years of practice and got involved in tutoring. I guess I always liked teaching. And so I've been doing my program for nearly 40 years. I've taught maybe 130, 140,000 law students, about 10, 12% of all the American lawyers, I suppose, law students around the world. And in the course of that, what I basically try to do is overcome this problem of perform as a lawyer under severe time pressure. And I'm not trying to get students to 100 points out of 100, but if we can get you just to 35 or 40 points, you're going to get one of those rare and precious law school A's. So
I would imagine that
questions.
I'm sorry. I would imagine that you really had to dissect what goes into a law exam, because kind of like me with the LSAT, I didn't really know what I was looking at first, and I had to really struggle to develop a deep understanding and make my own progression into what goes into creating a successful result. And you said yourself that law exams weren't really your thing. Law school, you didn't care much for it. But then later, when you became a tutor, you developed this entire system as a result of that. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, almost all law students are pretty frustrated after the first term. I mean, almost everyone who goes to law school has been an A student all their lives. Everybody works hard. You asked a question or mentioned earlier the possibility of hyper competition, people tearing pages out of books, that sort of thing. One thing you have to understand when you go to law school, I mean, it is hyper competitive. Everybody there is very competitive. But these people are not only your classmates. Going forward in the profession, they are people who may refer cases to you. You may want to call for advice. So keep in mind when you're in law school that however objectionable someone may seem at that time, and probably just a function of being young and being nervous and all of that, over time you will see them at reunions and things like that, and these can be future colleagues. So that's something to think about. But you're right. I was frustrated taking the exams. I was grateful to pass. Later in upper level courses, you can write papers, you have more time, you can perform, I think, more according to your ability. But I did, over a period of years of tutoring, I revisited this thing. This is something you don't do. Once you're out of law school, you're off to practice. But most lawyers will say, if I knew what I knew now, after years of practice, oh boy, law school would have been really different. Well, what is it we know after some years of practice that would have made a difference back in law school? And that's what I happened to go back and, in a sort of dogged way, figure out all the little bits. And so I've been polishing this for nearly 40 years. It's awfully effective. What I might suggest to your students, just go to the LEEWS website, which is LEEWS.com. There's a free download book there called Gaming Emperor Law School, 30 plus years of taking advantage of what they don't teach you in law school. And there you'll find a history of law schools, the difference between state and federal courses, things that students should know, but you know, when you go to law school, they never even take you downtown to the courthouse. There are courtrooms in the law school, but it's way too academic, and LEEWS is sort of the transition between academia and the actual practice of law. I want you to go into the exam thinking more like a lawyer, less like a student.
Yeah, law schools do get a lot of criticism for being too theoretical and impractical. And they've started talking about making some changes towards going from theory into practice, because all these law grads don't really know how to practice law. And then the law firms have to educate them in the process. So I'm wondering, what are some of the things students could do differently during law school to help better prepare them for the practice of law, as well as do well on their exams? Because I understand from what you've told me before in our previous discussions that law schools don't really even prepare students for the exams properly.
No, it's, I mean, look, you're going to be pretty happy to get admitted to law school. You're going to be proud of your school. Nobody badmouths their law school once they've graduated. It just doesn't make sense as a professional. Now, simply because Yale's ranked #1, or maybe it's just my persona, I will readily, and I do in my book, I will trash the way law school is conducted. And it's gotten worse because the professors at the top law schools normally have to have PhDs to get hired now. If you've got a PhD in something other than law, history, politics, I don't think you ever really wanted to be a lawyer, but maybe you couldn't get a teaching job there. You scored 35, 40 points on a few law school exams, got a federal clerkship, you're back teaching, and it's way theoretical. You can graduate from Yale and take a third of your classes in the schools of public health or forestry. I got credit for working on a novel my first year. I mean, this is nonsense. I'll give you an example of how little you know about practice. Some of us were really impressed when we had friends who'd graduated who did their first real estate closing. Now, a real estate closing is a pretty basic practice. It's not high-level lawyering, but it still was a mystery, Greek to us who were still in law school, and it shouldn't be that way. So once you're in law school, I would recommend what I tell everybody: go join the local bar association. There they'll either waive the fee or the student price is lower. They're really happy, these lawyers and judges, to meet students in law school. Probably some of them will have gone to the law school you're attending, get on some of their committees. It's a wonderful resource for for job connections, and don't live in a law school dorm. This is a little hotbed incubator. You need to get away from campus. Maybe participate in some of the extracurricular activities. There's prisoners' rights and all sorts of things, which quite frankly, if you're trying to work for a major firm, they don't give much credibility to this outside activity. But by all means, the most important thing is trying to get a couple of A's or even just one A on law school exams. I suppose I could use my daughter as an example. I mean, she went to Yale as an undergraduate. Her LSAT wasn't spectacular, but it was pretty high after taking an LSAT prep course that I paid for, and I can't even remember which one. But she got all B's her first semester in law school. And she really didn't pay much attention to my program because, hey, it's Dad's program. What do I care? Well, she paid a little more attention after getting all B's, like most law students do first term. She managed a single A her second term, thanks to me going over the kind of property exam she would have on the final. And that A got her the job that got her into practice. And there she was able to prove herself and go on to Jones Day, a major firm in DC, and 2 federal clerkships since. So law school is something you have to get through. It's probably a lot more expensive than it should be, but it can be gamed. And I suppose what I say is any lawyer worth his or her salt takes advantage of weaknesses in the opponent's case. Now, so if you want to be a lawyer, the first thing you want to take advantage of is weaknesses in law school teaching. But in that book I referenced, free at the website, there is a chapter that describes the first day of law school, which is pretty similar for everybody. So go there, it's free, look at that, and do what Steve tells you about prepping for the LSAT, because it's all about numbers and getting in. Later after law school, you'll learn how to be a lawyer.
Right. So I'll definitely reference, people should visit the LEEWS website, download the free book. It's really great that you put it out there. Easy download as a PDF. The LEEWS program as well. Great resource. I imagine that if your daughter had followed it from the beginning, she would have done much better and gotten A's from the start. So is that something you'd recommend to students the summer before law school? Is that too early to start learning about the process?
It's never too early to learn how to think like a lawyer. And let me just give a couple of indications of what's happening and why certain students, usually not the person who's talking the most in class, but there are certain students who seem to have an edge coming into law school. And it's not about innate brilliance or genius for the law, but engineers tend to do better. Math and science students, if someone says to me, what should I major in, or who do you think is going to do well in law school? I go with the chemical engineering undergraduate major over the English or journalism major every time, because actually legal analysis is math. It's very much like math, and the exams are kind of like math, except they don't give you the problems. You have to go diving into these funny fact patterns and find the problems and then apply the formulas, which turn out to be legal precepts that are relevant. So if you've had a lot of Talmudic studies, anything that's taught you how to think in a very precise, nitpicky, analytic way, that's a key to how lawyers think. And it's a learned process. I know you can't go on, and I can talk forever, but the most important lesson I got while I was at #1 ranked Yale Law School, and I have to confess, I dropped out a couple of times, but I finally finished in '77. I went to work for a lawyer, a single practitioner, a solo practitioner in New Haven. I was working for the princely sum of $5 an hour as a researcher. And we had a case against an insurance company. I guess our client had an accident or something. And the attorney says to me, Wentworth, I see here the client paid $126 on a quarterly insurance payment. I wonder if that might translate into consideration beyond the normal $125 payment, and he should get some extra compensation for this additional consideration. Well, my reaction as a student, as an academic, was, what? He paid an extra dollar on a quarterly payment? He probably just made a mistake writing the check. So the attorney says to me, and we didn't have computer research then. You went into something called corpus juris secundum, which is about 5 inches thick, and it's a compilation of cases collected from state courts around the country. He said, go into corpus juris secundum and see if you can find a precedent for additional payment or consideration on and you have to understand that judges tend to construe contracts against insurance companies because they know lawyers have prepared them, and the companies have an advantage. And sure enough, down in Maryland, I found a case where some minor little extra payment or something was deemed to have entitled the plaintiff to some extra consideration. Our client got a better settlement, and that was probably one of the most important lessons I learned in law school, is that lawyers think in a very close, nitpicky way. And if you can learn to think like that and have some systems, formulas for handling the exams, like I said, you don't have to score 70, 80 points out of 100, just 35 or 40, and you'll be way ahead of the competition.
Well, it's very interesting you say that. A couple of things jumped out to me. One of them is that you don't have to have high accuracy on the exam to still get an A or to still get a great score, because the curves are brutal. The same is true of the LSAT. You can get 10 questions wrong out of 100, meaning you score 90% correct. Yet that gives you a 97th percentile score. It's crazy. The time constraint also is, again, unrealistic. So I'm seeing a lot of parallels here with law school. And then back to what you were saying about the nature of law school, the nature of issue spotting and things like that being mechanical. Again, back to the LSAT, once again, mechanical, structural. There are formulas underlying these exams. And although there's a lot of dense language to navigate, what you're doing is you're still looking for the underlying skeletal structure, just as you're going back to look for a precedent in this case of the overpayment on the insurance premium, which becomes, in a way, an argument by analogy. What happened in this previous case should then be applied to the current situation, is what I would imagine you're arguing there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People have said to me, don't you think there's something unfair about what you're teaching here? Don't you think this is an unfair advantage? And you know what? It is an unfair advantage, and it's a competitive world out there. Be nice to the people you should be nice to. Try to get along with your classmates. Don't tear things out. No need to cheat. Oh, by the way, you should never, you can trust a lawyer. You're going to be an officer of the court. Your integrity, your word is paramount. So any of those kinds of habits, I've had so many thousands of students come through and my registration lines, and then they say, don't you want to see ID? I said, I assume you know who you are. you're a law student. You're going to be a lawyer. I assume I can trust you. And it's been a wonderful thing. No better clients, customers than law students. And those of you thinking about going into the law, well, yeah, it's just a wonderful place to start. You may end up somewhere else. You end up in running a company in Silicon Valley because everybody loves to have someone on board who knows how to think like a lawyer. But at this point, getting into law school, getting your first job, it's all about taking advantage because everybody else out there is smart and hardworking. But there's a certain amount of faith because I'm basically saying I know more than professors in law schools. And I suppose at my age and after all my experience, yeah, I'm willing to say that. There's an awful lot of professors out there who came through my program. So do what Steve tells you, and later, have faith and do what I tell you. I'll try to get something more up to date on our clunky old website.
Yeah, well, the LEEWS program, again, has been around. LEEWS has been around for decades, and the results speak for themselves. Other law school prep programs might pop up here and there and last for a year or two, but LEEWS has stood the test of time. So I would definitely encourage everyone to go to leews.com. You can download the free book that went and released more recently. Great resource, Gaming Emperor Law School, I believe is the title. And you can check that out and see more of Went's thoughts there as well.
Thanks so much, Steve. I appreciate that. And hey, everybody, hang with me, hang with Steve. You'll be fine.
And thanks everyone for watching. I'll include a link to LEEWS below this video if you'd like to find out more. And for those of you who may not know me, I'm Steve Schwartz, founder of the LSAT blog. Thanks again for watching, and we'll have to do another conversation like this again sometime on LEEWS. I'd love to share more of your thoughts with everyone.
Have a great day, Steve. Everybody else, have a fine day.
Take care, everyone. Bye.